Aloha and welcome to a Hanukkah Code. We're a weekly program on the Thinktech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroot Institute. I'm just delighted that today I get to do something fun. We call our program Hawaii Nei. And Hawaii Nei is something you can only say if you actually are in Hawaii. And it kind of means Hawaii here and now, from here and now. And so I say aloha to all of you who are out there across the world watching this program. We want to help you build your economy, so come here and help us build ours. But today, the fun thing I get to do is to talk about Hawaii Nei, Hawaii here and now, with a dear friend of mine, a man whom I admire, respect, and love very much. And he's opened his arms here at the Thinktech Hawaii Broadcast Studios, the genius behind it all, the producer-in-chief, Jay Fidell. And we're going to talk about Hawaii Nei. Jay, welcome to your program.
Your program, Keli'i.
Well, you're the one still paying the bills. It's always so fun just to chat, isn't it?
Well, this time of year, I think about paying the bills, and I think about our underwriters, and we go out and make requests to all of them and try to fund our kitty so that it will last through our season. And so far, it's been pretty good.
Well, that's good.
We need continuing effort in that regard.
Well, you're doing a good thing here, getting information out across the world. You know, one of the things we like to think about is Hawaii being a place of good things. And you are one of the good things. Well,
Remember that TV station,
Yes.
you know, one of the good things about Hawaii? Remember,
That's right.
It was a TV station touting itself.
There you
we
go.
are one of the good things about Hawaii.
Absolutely. When you think about the good things in Hawaii, I mean, you've lived here how many years? A long time.
Going
Many
on 50.
5 decades. What do you think is amongst the good things of Hawaii?
Well, you know, I think about this all the time. I'm not unprepared for that question because I see so many things that are deteriorating. So I keep thinking to myself, what are the good things? Remind me, what are the good things, you know? And the good things, I mean, the weather, you could say the weather, and sort of in a practical effect, the weather does, you know, offer good things. Although I think we squander the weather, and I'll tell you why if you ask me. But the good things is the people.
The people of Hawaii.
Despite all the problems and all the concerns and, you know, and the deterioration of this, that, and the other thing, the people are still pretty much good to each other. And that's the thing that makes this place different than other places.
You know, and you yourself represent that. 50 years here in Hawaii. A Jewish lawyer here in Hawaii. When I told you our program was a Hanukkah Code, you thought I was saying Happy Hanukkah. But really, we come from all over the planet. Our island, Oahu, the gathering place, is aptly named. And don't tell everybody this, but you know, even we who are part Hawaiian, we actually came from somewhere else before. So what we have in common with everybody is that we all have come from a distant place. As my kupuna, my teacher, Nona Beamer, used to say when she translated the Oli Aloha, the Aloha chant, which is so dear, her family passed that on. We are defined as those who have come from a far place. That's the definition of everybody from Hawaii, or in Hawaii today.
It's all true.
So you're right. I'd agree with you. I think the people. Do you think there's any difference in the people here, or any difference in how we are to each other from other major urban centers?
Oh, absolutely. We're friendlier. And it's because we live on an island and there's only so many of us. Even if we have, you know, 1.3 million by this time, it's a contained number, it's a contained community, and you keep running into the same people again and again in your life. And it's like you can't make A without meeting that same guy, you know, a couple of weeks later.
That's right.
So it doesn't pay to make A. You know, it's like if you look at the Navy, and this is an odd comparison, if you look at the Navy, the people on a submarine are friendly to each other. They all have good social skills because they have to. They live in a contained environment. Islands are different.
That's right. That's right. And that happens in many professions, like your own. Lawyers are very polite to each other because they may end up working for the other firm.
I wish I could agree with that. But
and so forth. Well, you know, for those of you who are tuning in, today we thought we'd pause and just reflect. I mean, sometimes in the hectic pace of all we do, even in the hectic pace of Hawaii, it's hard to reflect. Hard to believe, but in this island paradise, we're ranked number 3 in North America for the worst traffic. Vancouver, Los Angeles, and Honolulu. So we have our share of tension, of stress, of running in the rat race, so that Jay and I today are going to stop and simply reflect on Hawaii Nei. What is going on in Hawaii? What do we cherish about Hawaii? And what are we worried about here? What are some major concerns as we look forward to the future, and what would that future possibly be like? And so, once again, Jay Fidell has been an observer of the contemporary scene for quite some time. And, you mentioned something a little earlier. We have all this paradise, we have all this beauty, we have this wonderful weather, but you say we squander it.
We squander the weather. How many people you know send their kids up hiking? Maybe to the ball field they go, but that's not the weather. What about the great outdoors? We don't, my generation, which is a little while ago, and I'm sure yours.
Well, my parents told me to take a hike.
Many people. But back in the day, hiking outside, go to the neighbor islands, go to remote places, enjoy, embrace the earth, embrace Hawaii Nei, And we don't do that anymore. We don't get out. I think there are families which go through this kind of track which really never get out of a very narrow track, and it does not involve going into the hills.
Well, the other thing too is commercialism, albeit put that aside, I'm saddened that so few of our local people actually use these beautiful resort places like Waikiki. Now, we may not want to live in Waikiki, we may not want to go in through the traffic every Friday night, but people will fly to go to Las Vegas or Miami to experience hotels and the wonderful resorts, and very rarely use something that's right here at our front door.
We were in Waikiki a week, 10 days ago for a dinner, and it was the same conversation. This is why don't local people use Waikiki, enjoy Waikiki? And it's because it's not a friendly place for local people. It's very expensive. Meals, for example. Parking is very difficult.
There's parking?
Thank you. I rest my case. And then, of course, getting in there, the traffic lights and signals and all the congestion, and it's so irrational that everybody is blocked from going anywhere they want to go, and nobody's fixed it. I mean, I have this recording device on my cell phone, and when we drive into Waikiki, invariably something really bad happens for congestion any day of the week, and I wind up dictating a blog about how bad the traffic is. Now, Waikiki is really not friendly, and a lot of local people don't go there, and it's really too bad. There was a time when it belonged to all of us. Now it belongs to very few of us.
But don't you think it's also a mindset? I mean, we lower our standards a bit when we travel elsewhere. And I know that when I go to different cities, just the fact that I might be on vacation and away makes me want to get out into the street, walk around, experience some of the local culture, and even the commercialized visitor section. Maybe we're just a little too critical living here in paradise.
I think, walking in Waikiki is nice if you can get there. And people watching is good all over the world.
Of course.
I mean, in some cultures, it's really important to have people watching.
People just set up.
Europe, it's wonderful.
Right. People just set up chairs along the sidewalk to watch you walk by.
Well, years ago, the Jolly Roger. I don't know.
Yes, I remember the Jolly Roger.
Waikiki, because the sidewalks are pretty wide, and there was more than one restaurant, where you could sit and have a meal or a beverage outside the restaurant in the street. Excuse me. There aren't many like those. I think there's one, and it's sort of very, very modest right now. There are literally no outdoor, even in Manhattan on Avenue of the Americas.
Sure.
There are, in Manhattan, where it snows and rains and the weather can be really awful.
Outdoor cafes.
Outdoor cafes popping up everywhere. Our outdoor cafes have gone away. We have the best weather, arguably, in the world, and yet we have the fewest outdoor cafes in the world. Why? Why is that happening? What is wrong with us that we don't do that? It's awful.
Jay, it's election year 2014. If you were to run for governor, or king, even, for that matter.
Kings don't run for office. That's the wonderful thing about being king.
What would you...
On the other hand, sometimes they lose their heads.
That's right,
Yeah.
That's right. So what would you offer the people? What would your platform be? What would make Hawaii Nei even better than it is?
I don't think it would get me elected, but here's what I would offer the people. I would offer the great the second unification of the islands. The second unification. The first one under Kamehameha was in 1810. As we've had this conversation, haven't we?
Yeah, okay. I'm thinking the 1778 coming together of the
I don't think
various islands.
I don't think he fixed it until about 1810.
All right,
He tried.
1810, there we go.
I think it took 20 years to put it together. And, he brought them together. He was unable to bring Kauai into the mix voluntarily or by force. So he made some sort of deal with Kauai, as I recall. I wasn't there, but that's my recollection. And so at one point in time, the islands were together. They were unified. That was a remarkable thing because they are islands, and islands tend to drift away from each other. And since that time, on and off, we have drifted again. And in recent years, and I would say beginning sometime after statehood, maybe beginning in the 70s or the 80s or maybe even the 90s, the islands have drifted away from each other. And we have what I call insular drift, where the islands don't really care about the other islands, where nobody makes an effort to travel between the islands. Traveling is so expensive, nobody wants to do it. When I came here, everybody was out there with zoris and a straw mat and an igloo, traveling to other islands all the time.
Sure.
It was a boyfriend, girlfriend thing, a husband and wife thing, family thing, all the time. And gradually, airfares have exceeded income somehow. And now you want to go for that trip, it's $300. It's way beyond zoris and igloos. It's a serious financial experience.
That's right.
And nobody does it. Result is that the family bonds are strained, commercial bonds are strained, and just the ordinary ebb and flow of traffic between elements of the state has disappeared. And it's really TDB. That means too bad.
Yeah.
And I don't know what can be done about it, but if you ask me what I would say, running for governor, I would say we got to fix that first.
Well,
it's a very serious problem.
I'm glad you mentioned that. When we take a look at the costs of inter-island, inter-county transport of individuals and goods, they are exorbitant. And so we have items that should really be going by ferry, going by plane, and it's one issue to talk about the question, where's the money flowing? Why is it this way? But from my perspective at the Grassroots Institute, one of the things we're concerned about is the reduction of the opportunity for islands to compete with and cooperate with one another. Without the ability to have low-cost transport of goods, it's very difficult.
You must have loved the decision by Pasha Shipping Lines to withdraw from the market. How did you feel about that?
Well, interestingly, when that came out, I was in the midst of a neighbor county tour. And I've had the opportunity through Grassroots Institute to speak with groups on the Big Island and on Maui. And two conversations came up spontaneously. One is there is still a lamenting of the scuttling of the super ferry.
It should be a permanent lamenting.
That's right. That has kind of toned down a little bit on Oahu, but on the neighbor islands, Maui, the Big Island, the people feel the absence of low-cost transport options, and that affects their businesses, it affects their livelihood, and so forth. But the Pasha item came up because basically now we have a reduction in the number of companies serving us between the islands, a greater concentration, I won't name who the monopoly is, but a greater concentration into one company. And it seems to be that our state has been on a pathway of reducing competition between various elements, whether it's business to business or island to island, and centralizing for the last 50 years. And that's probably a fundamental frame of reference that needs to be addressed.
I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yes.
My insular drift is directly related to that.
Well, at Grassroots Institute, we've joined with a good number of think tanks across the country in promoting an idea called competitive federalism. Now today when you say federalism, everybody thinks the big federal government. But really, back at the times of our founding fathers and others, federalism meant the idea that each of the states was autonomous to some extent, and each of the states can determine its own direction, and each of the states competes with the others, and they create this exciting dynamic through the competition. And the federal government is just kind of like a service bureau to do things you can't do, like warfare, as a nation.
But you don't need competitive federalism to know that not having a ferry is really bad news.
Well, tell us about that when we come back from this break. And we're going to just be hanging on edge to hear what Jay Fidell has to say about what we're missing without a super ferry. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. Today talking with Jay Fidell of Thinktech Hawaii. We hope you'll visit the Thinktech Hawaii Broadcast Network website, thinktechhawaii.com, and we will be right back talking about Hawaii Nei, Hawaii Here and Now, right after this brief message.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for Thinktech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Welcome back to a Hanukkah Code. We're here every week on the Thinktech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. Jay Fidell, founder of Thinktech Hawaii, has wonderful ideas. Every now and then I get to just chat with him, and that's what we're doing today. Hawaii Nei, Hawaii Here and Now. And we'll just jump right back into the thick of it, talking about the super ferry. Well, what does the super ferry really mean? Recently, as I traveled on Maui and on the Big Island, people spontaneously brought up the fact that they wished we had a super ferry. We wished we had a low-cost means of transporting individuals and vehicles along with their goods between the islands, for all kinds of reasons: social reasons, family reasons, business reasons, the ability to compete, the ability to find new markets, and so forth. And one of the sad things in our history is that a group of businessmen invested in Hawaii, lost about $65 million or so on a project to connect the islands through super ferry that just didn't pan out. There are reasons for that, but I want to jump back into our conversation. We were talking earlier about the fact that a good idea is promoting competition and interaction between different entities, particularly the islands. And without the transportation option, we just reduce that tremendously and keep the power in the hands of a few.
Well, you look at it from the point of view of grassroots and competitive federalism. I don't need to get there. I look at it from the point of common sense and the avoidance of the continuing process that I see as insular drift. And I think the islands don't care about each other. They don't care about the welfare of one to the other. The neighbor islands don't care about Oahu. Oahu, precious little, doesn't care about the neighbor islands. And there's no real transportation because nobody wants the transportation. You say you met people in your trips around the neighbor islands that felt bad that we didn't have a super ferry, but you can also find people in the neighbor islands who say, I don't want a super ferry. I don't want those people from Oahu coming over here.
Well, you know, here we have to deal with the fact that very often the radicals who oppose something get the louder voice and are often picked up by our news media. I think there are many
who makes it sound like they are very important people.
That's right. I mean, we had groups ranging from those who protect the environment to those who are protecting Hawaiian culture and so forth, who are really at the front of an operation that had very little, or at least a viewpoint that had very little resonance with the people. But when you object to something, sometimes your voice is a lot louder.
I don't understand how that works. You know, I mean, I've always felt, and I'm sure you have too, that the majority theoretically should rule. And I would say the majority of the people wanted a super ferry. And yet, all of our institutions scuttled it. because of a handful of protesters, because of maybe sort of an underlying process of insular drift. We don't care about going to Maui. We don't need to go to Maui. And we don't want, if you're in Maui, we don't want them coming here. We have our own thing. We have our own rent-a-car companies. We have our own restaurants, our own produce. We want to be, quote, distributed. We can get into energy later and talk about this too. And I think that that's the real problem here. Everyone was right by saying no, but collectively we were revealing something about ourselves. And when you take the mask off that monkey, it's really not a good thing.
Well, I think a significant dimension of that is revealed when we follow the money and we ask the question, who stands to gain by limiting the transportation options between the islands? And I don't want to be too superfluous about it, but that's an easy equation to take a look at. But in a broader sense, it speaks to the fact that there are power structures in our state. And as Lord Acton said, power corrupts and absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. We talk about a single party political system. And it doesn't have to be the Democrats. It could have been the Republicans, and it was at one time. Just the mere fact that it's predominantly a single party leads to a certain kind of stagnation of creativity, preservation of power, and people are not pioneering new things like how can we create greater interaction between the islands and how can that drive our economy. We don't think of that as something that could drive our economy.
I don't know if there's a solution on this. I think about it all the time. And the people I talk to all, cluck their tongues and shake their heads and say, oh, I wish there was a super ferry. But the reality is that the lack of the super ferry, the lack of any reasonable cost of transportation island to island is a horrendous barrier to our economy. We're not operating as a single state. We're operating as separate counties. Economically, socially, what is going on here? We have different states or different states. and we are not really realizing our potential in anything because of this. So that's why I say top of my list is that how do you change this? I don't have an easy answer. I think if there is a governor who could make this happen, or a candidate for governor who could make this happen, I would be behind that person. Even to come up with a theory about how do you deal with it, I would be behind that person.
One of the things that it's important to recognize is that creating greater interchange, communication, transportation, commerce, and just social exchange between the islands is not a neighbor island issue. It's something that speaks to the very health of all of the islands together. It comes from the perspective of saying that we've got to be interactive. We are in the 21st century where the #1 power across the world, as displayed by Google or Facebook or any other social media, is human connectivity. It's not the technology. It is the networking of human beings with one another. And when we cut that off right in the midst of our state, we're actually choking ourselves, and we're even less connective than to the rest of the world. So it's all about that human connectivity. Yeah. Let me ask you this: what changes could bring about a growth of Hawaii's productive economy? What would you like to see happen that could take us out of the economic doldrums we're in, out of a government that can't afford the basic services that it's providing, if it should? But what is it that could really boost this economy if it were one item that you would champion?
Let me have two.
All right, you may have two. You may have an entire box full.
This is not necessarily in order of importance between the two of them, but one of them has to be growing a tech industry. You talk about the biggest companies in the world now are tech companies. We don't have a scintilla of that. We could have, we should have, we talked about it all through the lingo years, and at the end of the day, we knocked off, we killed Act 221. Now, there are people who feel, and probably to some extent rightfully so, there was abuse about it. But what it was an icon for young people who wanted to go into the tech industry and build it as an industry that could compete globally. And when it was killed, the message was very clear. The government doesn't want you to do that. The government's not going to incentivize you. The government's going to beat you up and criticize you about being in that effort. And the result is when they killed, and Linda Lingle was primary in this, when they killed, and the Republicans, when they killed 221 as, quote, an abuse, they also killed the tech industry. And it was visible, predictable at the time. You could see what was going to happen. And it did happen. Now, you can also argue that these days there's an emerging new millennial entrepreneur generation, coming about. It isn't the same thing. Back in 2003, 4, they wanted to cure cancer. They wanted to be global. They wanted to, be a multi-billion-dollar industry in Hawaii. And I think we might have been able to do that, except for what happened.
Sure. What's our path back? What would a new governor, what would a new legislature have to do in order to help create a viable tech economy here in Hawaii?
You have to provide a cloth mother.
Okay.
A soft landing, an easy place, and you have to say, we care about you. We give you the nod. We want you to succeed. You're our special kids, our special progeny. We're with you all the way. We want you to succeed.
Are you talking about tax credits?
I'm talking about incentives of any kind. I mean, for example, we're in the process of losing Manoa Innovation Center because the legislature, in its wisdom, allowed the lease to expire without renewal, so that the whole thing goes back to is now going to be used for office space by the university. So the nascent possibilities, of growing entrepreneurs in that space are essentially gone. And the one that's now on the drawing board, in fact, I think it's coming up for consideration this week by HCDA, is a new building of, I think the total square footage is 50,000 feet, which is small compared to what they had before. And it's not being done by HTDC as much as it's being done by HCDA. And good for HCDA for at least saving HTDC to that degree. But the bottom line is, we're going down the staircase, not up the staircase. We're giving less incentives, less of a cloth mother, less of a nod, a loving embrace to the tech industry. And I think it's really pretty much gone. You can talk about entrepreneurs, but hey, they do entrepreneurs for apps, which is really not tech. They do entrepreneurs for games. They do entrepreneurs for things that are not really significant in the global marketplace. And we have a fringe tech industry that is never going to amount to anything close to what we envisioned back 10 years ago. So, I mean, if you ask me what can be done to bring it back, we'd have to do some really dramatic tax incentive or other incentive to make people feel here and there and far and wide that this state really cares about building a tech industry. We're a long way from that now. Not only are we a long way in terms of our own perception of it, I mean, you and me and the people we know, but the legislature, considers it radioactive. They're not going to do 221 again. And I don't understand that process of radioactivity. It's the same thing in Super Ferry. It's radioactive. They're not going to do it again. It's dead. I mean, when does it come back? Nobody knows. Not in our lifetime, for sure.
Sure. My thought is that if there are courageous candidates who truly have a vision of Hawaii as being a high-tech competitor, that they will go to battle on these issues, that we will get back a super ferry of some form or another. We will create a high-tech incubation capacity at a scale that will be attractive. And I think there's another element. It's also dependent upon whether we have the right infrastructure, but there's also something independent that needs to happen in order to encourage foreign and statewide, nationwide investment. What do you think we need to do to tap into international markets, particularly China and Asia, in more than a token way, more than a cultural, educational bridge, but in order for Hawaii to be a major investment destination?
You're jumping my list, but it's okay.
But for the purpose of building industry.
You're jumping my list. I mean, I think what you're really talking about here is incentivizing investment from elsewhere.
Yes.
And I don't know how we're going to do that. I'll tell you why I say that. Because we have KS here and we have the ERS, and they don't invest locally. They don't invest in entrepreneurs. They never invested in tech locally. Derivatively, maybe, in some small fraction, but never seriously, and they didn't want to. And what's the message of that? Here's the largest capital concentrations in the state don't invest in local businesses. What? I mean, it's hard to believe. Well, if they don't, why should I? Maybe they know something. So nobody does. Result is this place is capital starved. New businesses can't get capital. And then we do things like the super ferry and knocking off Lehman in New York, and 55 million or more, who knows how much investors lost on that deal, really horribly, like Black Monday kind of loss. Who in Wall Street will make a serious investment in Hawaii now?
Right.
Nobody. So we got a long way to climb back to a position of credibility for Wall Street investment. It's a long way to go. I don't know where you start.
Well, our problem is parallel to the issue China itself was dealing with. China moving from a central control mindset in which expropriation of the assets of a foreign entity is part of the game book, has to rehabilitate itself. So it sets up special economic zones. And one of the important things that happens in these special economic zones is they say government cannot come in and interfere with investment. This is the reason Shenzhen, for example, we've talked about that before, in the space of 30 years goes from a small sleepy fishing town to a 9 million population industry that's now shifting from factory into a basic financial sector. So the irony is this. China has figured out that to some extent, at least within its special economic zones, it really has to tame government. It really has to have government take a promotional role toward business as opposed to one that merely regulates it to death. Do you think that's possible here in the Hawaii environment?
No.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
How would that be possible? I mean, we have an overblown state regulatory system. We have people who are sworn to prevent all progress. In the name of environment or any other thing, maybe just personal kuleana, but they don't want progress, and they are going to stop applications. They're going to sit on applications. Everything moves so slowly, and when it moves so slowly, what you don't realize that some doesn't move at all. Maybe a lot doesn't move at all. So, I mean, I don't know how we're going to fix that.
Well, do you remember Andrew Jackson? Did you know him?
I didn't know him personally, but I admired the man.
Probably iconically known as the most populist of the early presidents.
He was nasty too.
Yes, of course. But he got the people riled up. And do you think we need to have a political figure who commands leadership at that level, capable of inspiring people, capable of saying there's a new day ahead of us? Do you have...
New day may be the wrong phraseology.
New Deal, maybe?
That's better than New Day. No, I mean, I think it'll happen one day, actually, Keli'i. I think we'll be so sick about these things that some political figure will emerge and say, look, I'm honest, I say what I mean what I say. I am not going to, just give you soft soap about things. I'm going to tell you the hard truth, and I'm going to care about everybody. I'm going to care about taking us to the next step and fixing all these things. I mean, if Jack Burns could come back right now, I think he could do this. He was an amazing man. If some of the great leaders of the big 5 companies could come back right now, they could do this. But right now, I don't think I think it's hard to find anybody who would do that. Ultimately, we're going to need somebody like that because the state has a deficit in leadership. Has had a deficit in leadership for really quite some time. Everybody seems bent on the next election rather than what the right thing is.
What do you think is one of the most important qualities in leadership, in the kind of leader who could really lead Hawaii's people out of the mess they're in into the next level?
You want a one-word,
yeah.
One-sentence answer? Don't be a politician.
Don't be a politician.
Be a leader. It's different.
I'm going to ask you what that difference is when we come back to our final segment. You're listening and watching Jay Fidell. I'm Keli'i Akina. We're on the Thinktech Hawaii Broadcast Network, and I want to say thanks to all of the volunteers and supporters and investors who make Thinktech Hawaii possible. Without you, we wouldn't have this broadcast network that's up and operating round the clock, almost round the clock. We do a little bit of sleeping, producing original content from Hawaii for the world. Go to the thinktechhawaii.com website. We'll be right back after this brief message.
We want to thank our underwriters.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company.
The Hightech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future.
Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions.
I'm Nicole Horry. Thanks so much for joining us on Thinktech.
I'm Maria Kashen. See you next time.
Welcome back to a Hanukkah Code. Do you know what that means? It means let's work together, a Hanukkah Code. Let's work together, uniting Hawaii's people for a better government, economy, and society. Who can fight against that? That's what we have to do. And that's what Jay Fidell and I are doing. We do that in our spare time, in our waking days, and in our sleep. We think and dream about making Hawaii a better place. I really appreciate Jay. Jay, you know that I am part Hawaiian. Love my heritage. Have grown up knowing the culture. Was a chanter for Winona Beamer's Hula Halau. I struggled as I came to the end of my high school years whether to go off to college and in hopes of someday becoming a Jewish lawyer, or or staying here and actually becoming a Hawaii sovereignty activist and a cultural practitioner. I hope I'm a little bit of both. Both the educated person in the Western sense, but also someone who preserves the actual knowledge and culture of Hawaii. So I look at the current the current resurgence of interest in Hawaiian identity as somebody who is part Hawaiian, who's very much committed to the advancement of the Hawaiian people. And of course, in the context of aloha for all people, I'd be interested in knowing how you, Jay, from your vantage point, I don't think you are part Hawaiian in blood. I know you're Hawaiian in heart, absolutely. But how do you look at this issue right now, especially the emphasis that there is on Hawaiian identity and sovereignty?
I love it. I love it. I think it's exquisitely valuable for all of us. It's nutritious and fine and unique. And when I mentioned before that I thought one of the good things about Hawaii was the people, the Hawaiian culture, the Hawaiian way of looking at things, the Hawaiian reemergence, however, is an important part of what
Sure.
my statement in that regard. On the other hand, I don't see it as racial. I don't see race. Being here for 50 years has taught me not to see race. I don't want anyone else to see race. I don't want to be divided by race. I want the best that you have, or that any race, any culture has to offer, but I don't want it to be a barrier between us. Some people use it as a barrier between us. This is not good. So I think over time it'll probably mellow out, but right now there are too many people, in my opinion, who see it as a barrier.
Well, I like to think that the idea of boats in a harbor is very relevant to this issue. To raise the water level of one boat, the best way is to raise the water level of all boats. And as I look at the resources that are in this land, land, water, the institutions we have, and so forth, and the resources that have been accorded to the Native Hawaiian population, it would still make sense that raising the water level of everyone is what raises the water level of any one boat. And so we're all in the same boat, so to speak.
Especially in an island state, for sure.
So if by dividing us by race, we actually limit our capacity to help any one particular ethnic group. Now, I don't have any problem with the celebration of our ethnicity, nor the honor to be accorded to the
no one should have a problem
people who
with
first
that.
populated these islands, and the richness of the culture. And there are wonderful things, many of them unique about the Hawaiian culture that do represent global values. Take aloha, for example. You know, Hawaiians have some of the finest articulation of what that is in terms of cultural values. So all of that is what we have to stand for, as well as caring for the disadvantaged state of some of the Native Hawaiian people. But
all the disadvantaged people should be cared for.
Absolutely, and that's the point I wanted to make here. You know, on this very program, in this very stage here, we've interviewed OHA trustees. One of them said on stage something that was very, very true, that resonated. He said, I don't know if you remember this, you know, Keli'i, most of us Hawaiians are mostly something else.
I do remember that.
Yeah, and what I thought, what a beautiful...
Everybody is mostly somebody.
Right. What a beautiful and candid expression that we really are each other in many ways, and that our welfare is linked.
Exactly.
That to care for the welfare of everyone is the best thing we can do to care for the welfare of any one of us.
You know, the Hawaiian people really talk that language. I mean, I think they mean that language, and that's the point I get out of this. I mean, that is a sustaining value for the state. And the more barriers we put up, the further away we are from that. We can't have barriers among any cultures. And that particular value, I think, is strong in the Hawaiian culture. I want to see that value pervade in the state.
Absolutely, and you know, we are in agreement that to be truly Hawaiian is to have a sense of aloha that is very inclusive. That's why I always like to clarify that at the Grassroots Institute, we're firmly committed to the advancement of all people, including Native Hawaiians and Hawaiians by blood and Hawaiians at heart. The one thing that is difficult for us to stand in favor of is when the state government comes in and uses race as a criterion for establishing any governmental entity. We find that difficult on a constitutional level.
Yes, we do.
And in addition to that, we find that all people should be able to stand on the Bill of Rights without any special board of tribal leaders managing them or managing their assets. But beyond that, I think it's exciting to look at many of the efforts to define Hawaiian self-determinism, or there are many broad ways to define sovereignty. A beautiful Hawaiian lady talks about her being a homeschool mom, schooling her children as an expression of her sovereignty. And you know, the advancement of the individual and the empowerment of the individual are really the key for all people.
These are wonderful notions. But to go back and say that we got to reverse the whole territoriality and statehood, we got to go back to, we got to reject the mantle of 100 years of history, 120, 30 years, whatever it is, of history. That's just
sure.
That's not going to get us anywhere, and it's not going to bring us together.
Yes. Now, shifting gear, you and I about 4 o'clock every day say we don't have enough energy. So you and I are big advocates for
we have time
for energy and more energy. You probably have well, I know you want more energy.
I'll give you my 1 minute
Hawaii.
answer to that, okay? Because we don't have time, but.
That's how I keep you concise. I asked you in the last minute, what is your energy policy?
Blood money of $6-7 billion per annum. We're sending it overseas to the Middle East or wherever, and we're losing it out of the economy, and that's crazy. And I get on the freeway, I see all these SUVs with the tinted windows, you know, these great big cars. Nobody wants to do, there are 1,800 electric vehicles in the state. That's not enough. And, you know, we've got to have ways to save on energy. We must be. This is our most important initiative in the government right now, for sure. And I don't think that the legislature sees it that way, but they really should. And so if you ask me one thing that could help the economy, on a rack and pinion, one-to-one basis, it's having that $7 billion stay home. It's not even a question of saving the world. Just have it stay home.
There you go.
You and me, we can spend some of that money, Keli'i.
There we go. Home rule, homespun.
Yeah.
In our energy industry. Well, there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed Hawaii Nei, just a stroll through some of the issues facing us today, who we are, where we're going. And if you are listening and hoping to run for governor, well, I hope we've given you a few good pieces of advice that may be helpful. We really think that when leaders do look to the needs of the people, they have the best platform whatsoever, regardless of political party. My good friend, Jay Fidell, I appreciate you tremendously. Keep up the good work. Thanks for being your guest on your show today.
Thank you, Keli'i.
Aloha. This is Keli'i Akina with a Hanukkah Code. Let's work together. I'm president of the Grassroot Institute. Visit our website, grassroot, that's singular, grassrootinstitute.org. Much aloha until next week.